Hello and welcome back to the reading of the Holy Bible. Today we will be reading Deuteronomy chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. Chapter 13. False prophets must be slain. If there rise in the midst of thee a prophet, or one that saith he hath dreamed a dream, and he foretell a sign and a wonder, and that come to pass which he spoke, and he say to thee, Let us go and follow strange gods, which thou knowest not, and let us serve them, thou shalt not hear the words of that prophet or dreamer. For the Lord your God trieth you, that it may appear whether you love him with all your heart, with all your soul, or not. Follow the Lord your God, and fear him, and keep his commandments, and hear his voice. Him you shall serve, and to him you shall cleave. And that prophet or forger of dreams shall be slain, because he spoke to draw you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make thee go out of the way, which the Lord thy God commanded thee. And thou shalt take away the evil out of the midst of thee. Relatives and friends who urge idolatry. If thy brother, the son of thy mother, or thy son or daughter, or the wife that is in thy bosom, or thy friend whom thou lovest as thy own soul, would persuade thee secretly, saying, Let us go and serve strange gods, which thou knowest not, nor thy fathers, of all the nations round about, that are near or afar off, from one end of the earth to the other, consent not to him, hear him not, neither let thy eyes spare him to pity him and conceal him, but thou shalt presently put him to death. Let thy hand be first upon him, and afterwards the hands of all the people. With stones shall he be stoned to death, because he would have withdrawn thee from the Lord thy God, who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, that all Israel hearing may fear, and may do no more anything like this. Chapter 13, verse 9. Presently put him to death, not by killing him by private authority, but by informing the magistrate, and proceeding by order of justice. Idolatrous cities. If in one of thy cities, which the Lord thy God shall give thee to dwell in, thou hear some say, Children of Belial are gone out of the midst of thee, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their city, and have said, Let us go and serve strange gods, which you know not. Inquire carefully and diligently the truth of the thing by looking well into it. And if thou find that which is said to be certain, and that the abomination hath been really committed, thou shalt forthwith kill the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, and shalt destroy it, and all things that are in it, even the cattle, and all the household goods that are there. Thou shalt gather together in the midst of the streets thereof, and shalt burn them with the city itself, so as to consume all for the Lord thy God, and that it be a heap forever. It shall be built no more, and there shall nothing of that anathema stick to thy hand, that the Lord may turn from the wrath of his fury, and may have mercy on thee, and multiply thee as he swore to thy fathers, when thou shalt hear the voice of the Lord thy God, keeping all his precepts, which I command thee this day, that thou mayest do what is pleasing in the sight of the Lord thy God. Verse 13. Belial, an example, without yoke. Hence the wicked who refuse to be subject to the divine law are called in Scripture the children of Belial. Chapter 14. Disfiguring the body forbidden. Be ye children of the Lord your God, you shall not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness for the dead, because thou art a holy people to the Lord thy God, and he chose thee to be his peculiar people of all nations that are upon the earth. Clean and unclean animals, eat not the things that are unclean. These are the beasts that you shall eat, the ox and the sheep and the goat, the hart and the roe, the buffle, the chemois, the pigarg, the wild goat, the camelopardus, every beast that divideth the hoof in two parts, and cheweth the cud, you shall eat. But of them that chew the cud, but divide not the hoof, you shall not eat, such as the camel, the hare, and the cherogril, because they chew the cud, but divide not the hoof. They shall be unclean to you. The swine also, because it divideth the hoof, but cheweth not the cud, shall be unclean. Their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. Clean and unclean seafood. These shall you eat of all that abide in the waters. All that have fins and scales you shall eat. Such as are without fins and scales you shall not eat, because they are unclean. Clean and unclean fowl. All birds that are clean you shall eat. The unclean eat not, to wit, the eagle, and the gripe, and the osprey, the ringtail, and the vulture, and the kite according to their kind, and all of the raven's kind, and the ostrich, and the owl, and the loris, and the hawk according to its kind, the heron, and the swan, and the stork, and the cormorant, the porphyron, and the night crow, the bittern, and the charadrin, every one in their kind, the hoop also, and the bat. Everything that creepeth and hath little wings shall be unclean, and shall not be eaten. All that is clean you shall eat. Nothing that dies of itself shall be eaten. But whatsoever is dead of itself, eat not thereof. Give it to the stranger that is within thy gates to eat, or sell it to him, because thou art the holy people of the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not boil a kid in the milk of his dam. Annual tithes. Every year thou shalt set aside the tithes of all thy fruits that the earth bringeth forth, and thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, that his name may be called upon therein, the tithe of thy corn, and thy wine, and thy oil, and the firstborn of thy herds, and thy sheep, that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God at all times. But when the way and the place which the Lord thy God shall choose are far off, and he hath blessed thee, and thou canst not carry all these things thither, thou shalt sell them all, and turn them into money, and shalt carry it in thy hand, and shalt go to the place which the Lord shall choose. And thou shalt buy with the same money whatsoever pleaseth thee, either of the herds or of sheep, wine also, and strong drink, and all that thy soul desireth. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God, and shalt feast, thou and thy house, and the Levite that is within thy gates, because thou forsake him not, because he hath no other part in thy possession. Charitable offerings. The third year thou shalt separate another tithe of all things that grow up to thee at that time, and shalt lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite that hath no other part nor possession with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, that are within thy gates, shall come, and shall eat and be filled, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the works of thy hands that thou shalt do. Chapter 15. Year of Remission. In the 7th year thou shalt make a remission, which shall be celebrated in this order. He to whom anything is owing from his friend or neighbor or brother cannot demand it again, because it is the year of remission of the Lord. Of the foreigner or stranger thou mayest exact it of thy countryman and neighbor. Thou shalt not have power to demand it again. And there shall be no poor nor beggar among you, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in the land which he will give thee in possession. Yet so, if thou hear the voice of the Lord thy God, and keep all things that he hath ordained, and which I command thee this day, he will bless thee as he hath promised. Thou shalt lend to many nations, and thou shalt borrow of no man. Thou shalt have dominion over very many nations, and no one shall have dominion over thee. Chapter 15, verse 4. There shall be no poor. It is not to be understood as a promise that there should be no poor in Israel, as appears from verse 11, where we learn that God's people would never be at a loss to find objects for their charity. Rather, it is an ordinance that all should do their best to prevent the hardships of poverty and want. Charity to the poor. If one of thy brethren that dwelleth within the gates of thy city in the land which the Lord thy God will give thee come to poverty, thou shalt not harden thy heart, nor close thy hand, but shalt open it to the poor man. Thou shalt lend him that which thou perceivest he hath need of. Beware lest perhaps a wicked thought steal in upon thee, and thou say in thy heart, The 7th year of remission draweth nigh, and thou turn away thy eyes from thy poor brother, denying to lend him that which he asketh, lest he cry against thee to the Lord, and it become a sin unto thee. But thou shalt give to him, neither shalt thou do anything craftily in relieving his necessities, all that the Lord thy God may bless thee at all times, and in all things to which thou shalt put thy hand. There will not be any wanting poor in the land of thy habitation. Therefore I command thee to open thy hand to thy needy and poor brother that liveth in the land. Freedom of servants. When thy brother, a Hebrew man or Hebrew woman, is sold to thee, and hath served thee 6 years, in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free. And when thou sendest him out for free, thou shalt not let him go away empty, but shalt give him for his way out of thy flocks, and out of thy barn floor, and thy winepress, wherewith the Lord thy God shall bless thee. Remember that thy God shall bless thee. Remember that thou also wast a bondservant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God made thee free. And therefore I now command thee this. But if he say, I will not depart, because he loveth thee, and thy house, and findeth that he is well with thee, thou shalt take an awl, and bore through his ear in the door of thy house, and he shall serve thee for ever. Thou shalt do in like manner to thy woman servant also. Turn not away thy eyes from them when thou makest them free, because he hath served thee 6 years according to the wages of a hireling, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the works that thou doest. Sanctification of firstlings. Of the firstlings that come to thy herds and thy sheep, thou shalt sanctify to the Lord thy God whatever is of the male sex. Thou shalt not work with the firstlings of a bullock, and thou shalt not shear the firstlings of thy sheep. In the sight of the Lord thy God shalt thou eat them every year, in the place that the Lord shall choose, thou and thy house. But if it have a blemish, or be lame or blind, or in any part disfigured or feeble, it shall not be sacrificed to the Lord thy God, but thou shalt eat it within the gates of thy city. The clean and the unclean shall eat them alike, as the roe and as the hart. Only thou shalt take heed not to eat their blood, but pour it out on the earth as water. Chapter 16. The Passover. Observe the month of new corn, which is the first of the spring, that thou mayest celebrate the feast to the Lord thy God. Because in this month the Lord thy God brought thee out of Egypt by night. And thou shalt sacrifice the feast to the Lord thy God of sheep and of oxen, in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, that his name may dwell there. Thou shalt not eat with it leavened bread. 7 days shalt thou eat without leaven the bread of affliction, because thou camest out of Egypt in fear, that thou mayest remember the day of thy coming out of Egypt all the days of thy life. No leaven shall be seen in all thy coast for 7 days, neither shall any of the flesh of that which was sacrificed the first day in the evening remain until morning. Thou mayest not immolate the fays in any one of thy cities which the Lord thy God will give thee, but in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, that his name may dwell there. Thou shalt immolate the fays in the evening, at the going down of the sun, at which time thou camest out of Egypt. And thou shalt dress and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And in the morning, rising up, thou shalt go into thy dwellings. 6 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day, because it is the assembly of the Lord thy God, thou shalt do no work. Pentecost. Thou shalt remember unto thee 7 weeks from that day, wherein thou didst put the sickle to the corn, and thou shalt celebrate the festival of weeks to the Lord thy God, a voluntary oblation of thy hand, which thou shalt offer according to the blessing of the Lord thy God. And thou shalt feast before the Lord thy God, thou and thy son, and thy daughter, and thy maidservant, and thy manservant, and thy maidservant, and the Levite that is within thy gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, who abide with you, in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, that his name may dwell there. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a servant in Egypt, and thou shalt keep and do the things that are commanded. Feast of Tabernacles. Thou shalt celebrate the solemnity also of tabernacles 7 days, when thou hast gathered in thy fruit of the barn floor and of the winepress, and thou shalt make merry in thy festival time, thou, thy son, and thy daughter, thy manservant and thy maidservant, the Levite also and the stranger, and the fatherless and the widow that are within thy gates. 7 days shalt thou celebrate feast to the Lord thy God, in the place which the Lord shall choose, and the Lord thy God will bless thee in all thy fruits, and in every work of thy hands, and thou shalt be in joy. 3 times a year before all males shall appear before the Lord. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in all the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. No one shall appear with his hands empty before the Lord, but every one shall offer according to what he hath, according to the blessing of the Lord his God, which he shall give him. Judges and magistrates. Thou shalt appoint judges and magistrates in all thy gates, which the Lord thy God shall give thee, in all the tribes, that they may judge the people with just judgment, and not go aside to either part. Thou shalt not accept person nor gifts, for gifts blind the eyes of the wise, and change thy words of the just. Thou shalt follow justly after that which is just, that thou mayest live and possess the land which the Lord thy God shall give thee. Groves and images forbidden. Thou shalt plant no grove, nor any tree near the altar of the Lord thy God. Neither shalt thou make nor set up to thyself a statue, which things the Lord thy God hateth. Thank you very much for joining me for Deuteronomy, chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. Join me next week as we continue Deuteronomy with chapters 17, 18, 19, and 20. Thank you very much for watching. You make sure that you all happen to have a wonderful day, wonderful week, in fact, and God bless.